In this video, we're going to be breaking down the new Season 6 mid-season patch tier list for all the tanks that are the building blocks for the meta of the season. You got to understand that every single composition is built on what tanks are being played, what tanks are the most powerful, and because of some of the really big changes to tanks and supports, a lot of these tanks are going to be shifting around quite a bit. So we're going to break down the new meta so you know exactly what compositions are going to be played, what characters you should be maining regardless of the role you're on, and how to approach this meta. But if you want private coaching, I've helped over 100 people get Grandmaster, and you can be next. Check it out right now in the links down below. Now, the first thing that we need to talk about is Rein, and Rein's kind of that perfect character to talk about because really for a lot of ranks, Rein is just a very solid choice, especially if you're underneath the diamond rank. Rein is just a very consistent character. Not only does he allow your team to center around you, people are going to go in when you go in. Rein is a very powerful character that gives you a lot of capability to carry. Shatter's really strong, but as you start to climb, there are slightly better options, and I think Rein becomes weaker and weaker as you go up against better and better opposition that play at the right effective range against a Rein. Now, even still, if you get really good and competent with Rein, I think you can make him work, and there's a lot of Rein specialists that still make him work even in top 500. Very powerful character, and for a lot of you, he's going to be a really good pick. Still, though, I'm going to put him in about the B tier for now. Next up, we got to talk about D.Va, and with the Orisa quote-unquote meta and the Brawl meta, D.Va has been kind of the yin to the yang, where D.Va is the best character to be playing when you're playing on high ground centric maps. Especially now in a Brawl meta, we're seeing massive Zarya buffs, small Junker Queen buffs. Both characters can't take the high ground. Orisa's very strong, but can't really play on high ground as well. Sigma's also super good, but on very specific maps, and he's also not very good at claiming the high ground on maps like New Bonnie and things like that. And really, for ranked play, D.Va's the most reliable and consistent diver out of any of them, because with characters like Winston, you oftentimes need a full-on designated dive, and you need that full-on coordination, which you're not going to get guaranteed in every single game. In fact, most of the time, you're not going to get it at all, and I think Winston's a lot harder to set up than D.Va. D.Va can also play very different, where she can play a peel style, she can play an aggressive style, she can play just a area denial style. There's a lot of different things you can do on D.Va that's very strong, and because of how flexible she is and how many different situations she's good in, I'm putting her in the S tier based on that versatility alone. Also, D.Va's gonna get extra props as like the only tank that can do anything about flyers, and no tank likes dealing with the Far Mercy when your hit skins aren't dealing with it at all. Next up, we do gotta talk about Zarya, and the Zarya changes are absolutely insane. And I do understand that they're not for her self bubble, but that lessened cooldown and the bigger bubbles, so you're gonna get more energy, more uptime with your team bubbles, is freaking crazy. And there's so many good targets to bubble as well. You can target characters like Reaper, characters like Bastion. You can target all kinds of people on the front line. You can target people, bubble people to deny a dive. There's so much you can do with this now. You're gonna have like perma full charge as well, more uptime with your bubbles, and this all comes together with the biggest thing, and it's the fact that Zarya is straight up very good against Orisa. It's one of the few characters, one of the few tanks that can fight Orisa just straight up, doesn't have to run away, can output enough damage to just melt Orisa, can farm Orisa, and win the brawl. So not only is Zarya going to be very strong now, but it also pushes Orisa out a bit. And the thing that's interesting here is I think that Zarya is actually a bit worse against full dive than Orisa is. This sets up an interesting situation where if the enemy tank is on Orisa, Zarya is a really good counter to that Orisa, and you're playing Zarya, but then the enemy team could technically go like a full-on Winston dive and counter that Zarya, even with those better bubbles and things like that. I think that like a dive centered around a Winston and a Tracer, really good against the Zarya, even though those things aren't quite as good against an Orisa because the Orisa has that CC. So really, I think it's kind of interesting. We're gonna have to wait and see how it fully pans out, but undoubtedly Zarya is getting supercharged. She's at the very least an A, but I'm honestly gonna put her in the S tier because she's already good in the majority of ranks. I think she's one of the best characters to solo carry in most ranks of play, all the way up to like Masters rank. And then on top of that, now she's like giga buff. So yeah, I'm gonna put her in the S tier. I think she's very strong, and of course she still can't be played on those high ground centric maps. You know, she's not really a high ground centric map character, but on any low ground map, it's gonna be really hard for you to play D.Va against her as well. And I do think that she's just really strong outside of perhaps the Sigma long distance maps. Now we do gotta talk about Junker Queen, and Junker Queen did get some nice buffs, or a nice buff, more direct damage to the Jagged Blade. And Junker Queen's always gonna be a really good character to play if you're like the best tank in the lobby. Just a solid pick all around. Very capable of punishing people out of position and really kind of taking over a lobby. But right now, there are two really good brawl options in Orisa and Zarya. And Junker Queen has kind of pushed into that third place. And there's other comps and characters that you would rather play on different maps. So it's pushing her a little bit out of the meta. And I think she's sitting about where Ryan is, where she's good in the right situation, in the right hands with the right person playing it. But she's not always going to be good. And there's going to be some easier ways to get value right now in the meta. So I'm going to put her right about where I put Ryan in the B tier. TikTok, TikTok, one of these days, Blizzard will remember that Hog is a character that they're reworking. I don't really know what they're doing, but it has to be cooking something crazy, I swear. If they spend all this time and they just change like one little damage number, I'm gonna lose my freaking mind. They did say a rework, so what I'm imagining is what's taking a long time is like a ability rework that requires like a whole new animation and special effects and stuff like that. And that takes a long time, don't get me wrong. But in his current state, right now, do not play Hog. Like, I don't even know what to say. Right now, Orisa's really strong, Zarya's really strong, D.Va's really strong. All three of these tanks can deny what Hog is doing. Hog can't even consistently one-shot. Honest played in almost every single freaking game. And then, in addition to that, Life we were seeing play that can also deny your hooks. I mean, what are you playing this character for? Like, this character is not playable. I'm sorry. Unless you're the absolute GOAT, he's not the character for you right now. Now, I will say that in my last tier list, which I did at the very start of the season, I did slightly underrate Orisa, where I put Orisa at the very top of B tier, but really I should have put her at the very bottom of A. And even still, Orisa is a very powerful character. And I think that once people started realizing that Orisa is a very easy way to get value, people just started locking her. Probably more than she deserved. There's other ways to get value up against Orisa, even before all these changes. But Orisa was always the easiest way to just get some free value. Simple way to get value. Didn't even have to do that much to get a lot of value on her. And the meta kind of snowballed to just Orisa all the time, even though there were quite a bit of counters and other things you could do to play against Orisa. It was always just easier to just lock the Orisa. That being said, now, not only are people a little bit better at dealing with Orisa did get some pretty substantial nerfs, and Zarya is a nice fold to Orisa that is now being supercharged. This all kind of creates a situation where Orisa is a little bit weaker than she was before, but I'm still going to put her at the bottom of A tier because I still think that Orisa is very easy value. Still going to be a character that people should lock and can play when you want to just play a character that is very hard to punish, when you don't really know how to approach whatever the enemy team is doing and you're having a hard time getting value on tank. Orisa's always going to be there, and she's still like freaking unkillable. So yeah, I'm putting her in the A tier. She's still very strong, especially when you pair her with characters like freaking Torb. She just is so goddamn hard to deal with and approach in any real way from a lot of different characters. So yeah, I'm still putting her in the A tier. Very strong, and I definitely underrated her at the start of the patch, and I'm not going to do that again. The next up, we do got to talk about Sigma, and Sigma is basically like S tier on the maps that he's played in, and then he's not played on like any other map really. You don't really want to play him. He's like very map specific, right? He's really good on like Havana and Circuit Royale and the long distance maps. This is where Sigma really thrives, and then on the other maps, you don't really see him all that much. Even though he's not terrible, he's just not really that great, because when enemy brawlers can force a brawl onto you easier, you have that huge weakness, right? Sigma always wants to keep that effective range, that distance, and when you can't guarantee that distance, all of a sudden there's gaps in Sigma's play and weaknesses that can be exploited. Still though, Sigma has that maxed out pick rate on those maps, and that makes him a legitimate, necessary part of the meta. So I'm putting him at the top of A tier, where there's just maps that you just have to pick him. Like, you really have to learn Sigma. If you're a tank main, I don't really think you can get away with like never playing Sigma unless you're like the absolute GOAT at like someone like maybe Doomfist or something. Outside of that, you really got to learn him, because on those poke maps, on the maps that Sigma's good in, you're putting your team at such a huge disadvantage by not playing him. You go up against a competent Sigma, and your win rate on those maps are going to be like abysmal. I mean, that's just, it is what it is. It's going to be freaking in the floor. Now, Winston is a character that is a little bit difficult for me to place, because I do think that when played perfectly optimally in the right conditions, if you're playing in high elo with people that want to dive, Winston can be freaking insane and a really good counter to characters like Zarya. And you could even play a dive against Orisa as long as the enemy team is not playing like freaking, I don't know, Lifeweaver Brig Torb or something like that. You can still legitimately dive on Orisa and get a lot of value. If they're playing any character that is diveable, characters like Hanzo, characters like Ana, you can definitely capitalize on those characters if you have a coordinated dive and kind of make the team kind of collapse on itself. But outside of those parts, you're not really guaranteed that. And I think that it's going to depend also on your individual skill and the setups that you're going through. Like if you're in the low ranks of play, I would say Winston is pretty bad unless you're like duoing or trioing with guaranteed divers that are going to dive with you and coordinate with you. And then the high ranks of play, it's really going to depend on a lot of factors like map. It's going to depend on what the enemy team is playing. It's going to depend on if your team is going dive and how good you are at Winston. So there's a lot of different things. I still think all in all, based on his potential power level and how he can actually counter Zarya comps, be a better just direct diver than a D.Va composition, and even find value against all these various compositions when played properly, I had to put him in the high B. But yeah, he could shift around up here. But I'm trying to make this list kind of relative to all ranks and add some caveats in there, here and there. But yeah, he's still a powerful pick. He's just a little bit hard to get to work. And the next up, we do got to talk about Wrecking Ball. And honestly, the state for Wrecking Ball has gotten more and more dire. Right now, the meta just doesn't favor him. And even if we talk about him just objectively, he's kind of lost his place in a world where supports are just able to defend themselves, and in a world with a lot of just CC that is just shutting him down. Now, I will say specifically that universal support nerf, that change from 1.5 to or 2 to 1.5 seconds is nice for Wrecking Ball. Like that is a little nice for this character that wants to be able to kind of go for a little play and then swing around and like still fight maybe within that time frame. Still though, I think he's among the weaker of the divers. Like I would not even really suggest him, because right now you're really only going to be able to get a lot of value with him if you have a full dive. But I would rather you play Winston if you do have a full dive. And if you want to dive without him, I would like without a team, I would much rather have a character like Doomfist being able to go all in. So I'm actually going to be putting him in the C tier. So yeah. Next up, we do got to talk about Ramattra. And Ramatra's an interesting one because I still think that Ramattra is really slept on, underplayed. I understand that Ramattra has a little bit of trouble with Orisa and it can be frustrating, but I also do think that Ramattra can let you carry a ton of games. Like he really carries so freaking hard in the games that you're losing in, and I think he's a great character to have in your back pocket, and he's still really strong overall, but he is being pushed down a little bit by what is seeing play right now. And with characters better at poke than him, characters better at brawl than him, there's divers, a character that is kind of like a really catch-all flexible option in a sea of things that are kind of more specialty and more powerful on certain maps, he falls a little bit behind the wayside. I still think he's a really great pick and he's flexible overall, but I'm going to put him in the B tier. Keep in mind, I'm not really putting any of these characters in the B tier above or below anything else, but I think like they're all just solid, but there's better options, or they're hard to get to work, or it's map dependent. Last but certainly not least, we have Doomfist, and this is the most surprising thing that kind of happened in the Orisa meta, and I think will continue to happen. Even though Zarya is a really annoying matchup for Doomfist. Doomfist, understand, like a peel Zarya is really annoying. And there's a chance that Doomfist just goes right back down to the gutter when Zarya meta takes over. But because of how the meta has kind of played out, Doomfist is actually really good as an all-in diver, mainly because he doesn't necessarily like have to interact fully with Orisa. Like a lot of people think, oh, Doomfist just gets shut down by Orisa, but that's not necessarily the case, because all you have to do is exist. Like you just stay alive, exist. It's hard for the Orisa to kill you or do anything like that. If you're just playing on your front line, you can deny her space, deny her pushes, and then even if you're getting javelins, you're building power punches, and then all of a sudden you can pivot for an aggressive play out of nowhere with your ultimate. And Doomfist is making little bits of waves. Like he's actually rising in pick rate, seeing more play, has always been good in low rank, and is seeing more play in high rank. I think he's actually one of the best all-in divers right now in ranked. And Zarya specifically, if she warps the meta like super strongly, because right now what I imagine is that Zarya eats up a lot of the pick rate, but Orisa is still seeing a substantial amount of play, and all these other characters are seeing a substantial amount of play. And then Doomfist is going to sit right here in the A tier. But if for whatever reason Zarya becomes so strong, and the meta is going to shift because it takes a while for the meta to fully shift, where Orisa completely leaves the meta because no one plays Orisa anymore because everyone's just locking Zarya, then Doomfist also just kind of eats shit as well. So how good Doom is kind of right here in this little pocket of the meta is like relative to how strong Zarya becomes. So we're gonna have to wait and see on that one. But as is right now, he's gonna be, you know, in an A tier spot. He's actually really solid right now, but that could change really quickly as do metas change on a dime. As people get more used to what is actually viable, things will rotate, things will move, and I would imagine that Orisa and Doomfist in particular are two characters that could move out of nowhere, so definitely keep an eye out for that. But this is my Season 6 mid-season patch roundup for all the tanks, the best and worst tanks to play. Definitely let me know if you have any questions. Smash that like, subscribe if you enjoy the content, and check out my private coaching if you want to improve, climb to Grandmaster. Link will be in the description down below. Thank you so much for coming by, and I'll see you next time.